talking about this morning, we'll go ahead and read the first 4 verses of Ephesians chapter 6. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." And so as we've been studying in Ephesians and the latter part of chapter 5, and then as we begin studying in chapter 6, we're looking at these relationships that we have as Christians, one with another, husband and wife, that relationship. And now we're getting into our relationship as parent and child. And so last week we focused on verse 1 there, where it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." And so we spent a good bit of time looking at those first 2 phrases there. And just as a brief reminder of what we looked at last week, we'll go over just a couple of key points there. But that first point in "Children, obey your parents." Obedient children are a major factor in creating this home that is filled with joy and peace. And of course, this is the type of home life that we all would like to have. And that is a home that is filled with joy and peace. And so while parents are a major factor in that as well, children are another major factor. And so children need to realize that and act accordingly. When we look throughout the scriptures, we see that God has always required children to obey their parents. And so this was going back even into the old law. At the very beginning, children were required to obey their parents. So this is nothing new as we move forward into the new law. When a child has a proper relationship with their parent, it prepares them for other relationships. And so this is critical when we are bringing up our children and that into developing into a type of person that is going to have proper relationships throughout their entire life. This initial relationship between a parent and a child is very critical in developing them into the type of person that is going to have proper relationships throughout their entire life. And so that kind of sets the stage for their life and the relationships that they will have with other people. And then on the other hand, a child that has not learned respect for authority will cause chaos in society. And I think we all are well aware of this. Just, as we mentioned last week, just minor things as causing chaos in the grocery store or maybe family events or things like that. We all have been around children who have done that, who have caused chaos, but yet on a wider scale as well, just in society as a whole, kids who do not respect authority a lot of times will develop into the type of people that will not respect the law and therefore, break the law and cause chaos in society at large. And so it's very important for us as parents to instill this initial respect for authority between ourselves and our children. And then that way, that will further prepare them to have better relationships as they could move forward through life. That next phrase there, "in the Lord," and we discussed that as being that this is in accordance with God's will. And so God's not expecting a child to obey the parents and everything if that includes something that is going against his will. And we discussed there again, difficult situations and things that have to be worked through and, things of that nature. And so this is not always easy. It's not always an easy situation to navigate and to understand exactly what is best and what's the proper way to go about that. But we do know that God expects us to serve Him above all, above any man, whether it be our parents, whether it be the law of the land, principals, coaches, things of that nature. And so, we are to obey, the children are to obey the parents in the Lord. If we serve God, we will follow His standard. But given normal conditions, however, children must obey their parents in all things, as reiterated there in Colossians 3 and chapter 20. And so we spent a lot of time discussing those key points there last week. I think we had a really good study, had a lot of participation, and I appreciate those comments. Before we move on to the last phrase in this passage, does anybody have anything else they would like to say, something maybe you thought of over the past week that you wish you would have said last week or something like that as before we move on to the last part of this verse here? If not, this last phrase, for this is right. For this is right. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Children obeying parents is righteous. It is well-pleasing to God. And so, again, that is reiterated there in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 20. It's not just something done out of love and gratitude for the parents, although it should be motivated by that, but it's not just that. It is righteous. It is what God wants us to do. And obeying parents, children are obeying God. So this is a commandment from God. And so children don't obey this commandment just for the sake of their parents. They do so primarily for the sake of God, and then as a secondary reason, out of respect, honor, and love for their parents. But obedience to God is the primary motivator when a child obeys their parents. We all know that a child is not capable mentally or physically to make choices like an adult. They just don't have the life experiences. They just don't have the mental capacity in a lot of ways to make proper choices. And we all know this. You know, if you give a child the choice to eat candy all the time instead of eating things that would be nutritionally more valuable to them, a lot of times, or most of the time, the children will choose the candy and the junk food and things along those lines because they don't have the willpower, they don't have the mental capabilities to understand exactly what they're doing to their bodies. And so, and this translates also into spiritual matters as well, that they just don't understand those things. And so children need a parent to guide them into making these choices. And so as we get into the society that we live in today, what we have come to, the point that we have come to in a lot of things is where children are running the family. Children are making the choices, and the parents are looking to the child, what do you want to do? What choices do you want to make? And the children are guiding the family. And this is not the design that God had. Children are to obey the parents. The parents are the authority. They set the rules. They have the maturity, or they should have the maturity and the life experiences to make proper choices. And so we see these things, even going to the extreme. And I know a lot of times we get back to the transgender homosexual movement, but it's just a big thing today. But we see parents allowing their children to start taking these hormone either enhancing or reducing, or these things, allowing these children to make that choice at an early age to do those things when they are not mentally mature enough to make that decision. And so they are altering their bodies. They are altering their bodies in a way that will last a lifetime, and they're allowing them to make that decision at a very early age. And this is just not what God wants. It's not acceptable, even from a worldly standpoint. You would think people would understand that this is not an acceptable thing, but for some reason, it has become acceptable for us, for the society today, to allow children in a lot of places to do that. And so while it may not be as drastic as what some would like, as far as some of the surgical things that have been going on, that have been attempted, and in some states have been stopped, and others maybe not so much. I'm not for sure. It's kind of a fluid thing, so I really didn't do a lot of research as far as what's available where. But I do know there is a movement to start allowing children to make the choice to physically alter their bodies in a way that cannot be reversed. And they're making these decisions at a very early age. And so children need to understand that and it's tough. It's tough as a child, but parents more so need to understand that this is right. This is the plan that God has made for you to be in charge. For you to be in charge, for you to make those hard decisions. And at times, the kids aren't going to like it. But it's just the way it needs to be. Children left to themselves not only do what is right in their own eyes, they will eventually mock and despise their mothers and fathers, and they will be unruly. And so we have several passages in Proverbs that will point this out. We look at Proverbs chapter 30, verses 11 and 12. It says, there is a generation that curses its father and does not bless its mother. There's a generation that is pure in its own eyes, yet is not washed from its filthiness. And so the results of allowing children to guide their own steps, not keeping the proper the proper order. There you go. It just would not come out. The proper order in the family, and the authority. Having the parents be the authority, and the children being subject to that. I mean, it just permeates throughout society, and it causes chaos. They suffer terrible consequences. If we jump ahead in chapter 30 of Proverbs in verse 17, it says, the eye that mocks his father and scorns obedience to his mothers, the raven of the valley will pick out, and the young eagles will eat it. And so there we have some very vivid imagery that the writer here has portrayed. And so this is kind of how God views this sort of thing. It's not pleasing to him at all. If you remember, we looked at the list of sins that last week was some very, very grievous sins in that list, and their disobedience to parents was right in the middle of that. And so this is not something to be taken lightly. We do not do our children any favors by allowing them to be disobedient. And so they must learn that respect. They must learn respect for authority, and that they must obey that or suffer consequences. And so this is very important. It's not just to stroke our own egos. It's not just to make us feel important and superior, and that now that we have this authority over this little human, and it builds our ego up. This is right. This is what God wants. This is the order that he has set forth. And when we look at it throughout society, it works. It works. When a child respects the authority of their parents, they learn that, and attitudes are good all the way across the board. I mean, parents can take it too far, and there's a lot to be said, and we're going to be discussing that. I don't know if we'll get to it this week, but the Lord willing, at least next week, we'll be looking at some ways that parents can take this too far. But children need to learn this. This is the proper way, and it is what God has set forth, and it's not only pleasing to God, it's also what's best for society. Any comments or anything along those lines, that last part of verse 1?
Hey, Shane.
Yes.
That verse you read, number 17,
Mm-hmm.
It may correlate with the standard from Deuteronomy 21 about a rebellious child. You take him outside the city and stone him.
Yeah.
It seems quite severe, but under the old law, that's what was required of rebellious children. And so their bodies may be in a situation where they're decayed, where the ravens and the young eagle can eat their bodies.
Yeah.
Seems like we have the benefit of the new law of just the discipline.
Yeah.
Where the old law required them to be killed.
Yeah.
That's what I thought of when you read that verse.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Good point.
That's Deuteronomy 21:21.
All right. Any other comments there?
Shane, as parents, we always want what's best for our kids, so that's why we teach them to obey, and it doesn't, and I've thought about this over the years, you can't wait till they get 10 years old to start. If you really, and as parents, especially for new parents sometimes, that we all were at some point in time, you don't know that unless you were taught that,
Yeah.
And so, we start them young, and it's a whole lot easier, and how young is young? Well, young. We start out when they're young. And some, we all know that some of our kids are much easier than others, Some are very, they're eager to obey. And at some point in time, none of them want to obey anything, but which we all know that, it's still our responsibility. And we do our kids a disservice if we don't teach them that, because they're in for as my dad would say, they got a hard road to hoe, head on. And,
Yeah, and we need to start out young. And I don't know if I've ever even told this story, and Jake, I know he doesn't remember it, but I can remember he's probably a year or so old, and we're on the couch, and that's when we had the cordless phones. Everybody has cell phones now, but we had this cordless phone, and he was wanting it, and I had set it up on the back of the couch. And, he's just old enough to start standing up and reaching for that. And so I told him, no, put it up there. Well, he starts reaching for it. Well, I spat him. And we did that a couple of times, and I could see him sitting there reasoning in his mind, is it worth, what he's given me for me to go ahead and grab that phone? It's just like, well, I'm going to take it. I want it bad enough. And so, it kind of impressed me. He was very young, but I could just see in his mind, it going through, I see I'm getting some pushback on this, but I think I can take it. And he reached up and tried it again. And that was just the beginning. But anyway, Jake's turned out very well, very well. But anyway, it amazed me at how early of an age that these children start understanding those things. And we need to start early and be consistent. And consistency is tough. It's really tough. It's tough when you're tired and you just don't want to deal with it. You've had a long day, things haven't gone well at work, and you come in and it's just time, well, I'm letting that go because I just don't want to deal with it tonight. And it's tough to go ahead and deal with it. Yeah.
And Shane, of course, hindsight's always 20/20, of course, but I'll just, I'll say this just to kind of do a parallel of what I said. Sometimes, some of us, depending on how we were raised, then we may not be as strict with our kids, or we may not bring them under subjection to us as quickly as we should, because if you were brought up kind of in an abusive family, that causes a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And I won't go into any of that on, personally, but I struggled with that a long time over the years, And
Yeah.
of course, kids turned out okay. I mean, they're obedient, they're good, adults now. But it's more, it took me a while to understand that, because I felt like I didn't want to be abusive, because I knew how that was, and I knew how it made, I knew how people felt like that. So I didn't want to be overly abusive, and I don't think I was, but I certainly went way overboard sometimes the other way. I allowed some things to go on that probably wasn't that bad really at all looking back now, but I allowed some things that I might not should have. I should have been a little more stern maybe.
Yeah, being a parent is it's like a lot of other things. It's easy to be one extreme or the other. It's kind of like our political situation in the country. It's kind of like you have to be at one extreme or the other. And a lot of times it's difficult to find that happy medium of not being too overbearing, but yet not being too lax. And so, finding that sweet spot takes a lot of effort, because the tendency is to go one direction or the other to the extreme. And so, especially if you were raised in those two extremes, you have a lot of tendencies to maybe go to the other extreme or stay in the extreme that you were raised in. And so it's a difficult thing. Being a parent is not for the faint of heart. And when you take on that responsibility, you're taking on a huge emotional, spiritual, physical, anything you can think of is going to tax you. and it's going to try you, and you're going to see what kind of person you really are by the end of it in a lot of ways. So any other comments there along that line?
And you're gonna make mistakes.
Yeah, you're going to make mistakes, and
You learn, you have to learn.
yeah, and you have to learn from them, and we get a lot of respect from our children when we admit those mistakes, and we can come out and we can say, hey, I overreacted, I shouldn't have done that, and apologize to them, and so you will make mistakes. I mean, that is a given, and that's a good point. None of us in here who are parents were perfect or are perfect. And we will make mistakes. And we need to, and a lot of times it's tough to forgive yourself when you make those mistakes. And it's tough to move on. And, you make a mistake, and then there again, that tends to want to push you to one extreme or the other. And it's tough sometimes to get over those mistakes and get back centered where you need to be. All right, as we move on into verse 2 there, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 2 says, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. And so here we're going to be looking at, spending a good bit of time looking at this idea of honoring our father and mother. The word honor means to hold in awe, to value at a high price. And so I'm honoring this person or these two people. And so, they are highly valued in my sight. Whereas to obey is an action performed irrespective of attitude. To honor is an action based on attitude. And so we can literally obey someone without honoring them. But on top of obedience, we are told that we need to honor our fathers and mothers as well. Honor is a biblical attitude which we should have towards any who are in authority over us. And so we see that taught throughout the New Testament, how that, those who are in authority over us, we should honor. We should honor the government, those who have rule over us. And that trickles down to a lot of different people, not only on the federal or national level, but as we get down into the state, the county, the city, even our local policemen. We have the responsibility to honor those people. We have the responsibility to honor, our employers. We have the responsibility, of course, to honor our parents. And so we see this idea of honoring those who are in authority over us. It permeates the New Testament in a lot of different areas. And so this is especially true when it comes to the parent-child relationship. When we look at, the hierarchy of where our honor should be placed, of course, we know God should be honored above all. But as we work our way down, we look at maybe the church leaders, the elders, but parents are right up there. And I don't know, maybe they're right below God when it comes to children. I guess that would be a good discussion about where we put those things. But we should be honoring our parents. And so we discussed last week how that verse 1, under a lot of situation would primarily apply to a child living, under their parents' care. Verse 2, I know would encompass the entire parent-child relationship. And so this crosses over even into adulthood. And I would say maybe even after adulthood. Even after maybe our parents are gone, that honor should still be there, and honoring their guidance, their wishes for us, and all of those things should really never leave us. And so our parents, could be dead for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I still think that honor should be there, and that respect for them should be there as well. I was reading a commentary written by David Lipscomb, and I liked what he had to say about this passage. It says, to honor father and mother is to discharge faithfully the duties the child owes to them. Obedience in childhood, respect, reverence through life, tender care and support in old age, and kindness and love at all times. And so I think he does a really good job of describing what it means to honor our father and mother. It's something that will encompass our entire life as we honor them. And what a blessing it is to have godly parents who are easily honored, who give us good reasons to honor them. A lot of times this gets more difficult, maybe, some of the situations like David was talking about where you've got those extremes in parenthood and they make it more difficult to honor them. What a blessing it is for those of us who have godly parents to honor those, because it comes much, much more easy in that case. If the attitude is right, the proper act will follow. So, this carries with it a lot of different implications. Honor means definitely, maybe the fruit of our lips, how we speak to our parents, how we interact with them, how we listen to them, how we accept their advice and things along that nature. But as we move into adulthood and that relationship changes, it could mean, supporting our parents as well. And this could be support in different ways. It could just be, the actions that we need to take to help them do different things, or it could be ultimately that we are financially obligated to care for our parents. And so this all comes into play when we're looking at this entire relationship throughout our life and this sense of honor. And we won't take time to read that, but I have reference there on the screen, Matthew chapter 15, the first 6 verses. And most of us, if not all of us, are familiar with that passage where you have some there who are neglecting to care for their parents financially and saying, they're giving this money to God and therefore neglecting their parents. And we understand by the comments that Christ makes there that this was a way that they were using this as an excuse to neglect their parents. And Christ was very clear on the obligation that these people have in this passage, and therefore that translates to us today. And it's a very serious thing for us to have parents who are in need and we neglect those parents. And like I said, this could be needs in multiple different areas, but it could be financial. It could be just they need help. Maybe they're financially able to sustain themselves, but yet they need help in other ways. And it could be, maybe as we get older, the thinking doesn't get clearer, or thinking gets less clear, and we all know about scams and things today. We may need to be helping them keep their affairs straight. Maybe they're financially stable, but yet, there's all these things coming in, and we're constantly having to keep them away from those scams and things like that. It could be, just caring for them physically. You've got a parent who is not able to, they're bed bound, or they're not able to take care of things around the house. And so therefore we're obligated to assist them in those areas as well. And so parents who have supplied the needs of their children in the early years should have the reasonable expectation that their needs will be supplied by their children in later years, Jake. I mean, we laugh about that, but yet this is a reasonable expectation that parents should have. They should have this, and it's all well and good when we're looking forward, but when our parents are looking back at us, we need to understand that they have that reasonable expectation, and it's a God-given expectation that they will rely on us when they are older. And so we should step up when that time comes. When that time comes, they have that it's an expectation that is given to them by God. And so we shouldn't begrudge that. It is a God-given responsibility for children to do this, to take on that role. And that role may look vastly different depending on the situation. And I'm not up here judging anybody for the way that they've taken care of their parents, because I can tell you from experience, you really don't know what that's like until you're in that situation. And so unless you're very intimate with what's going on in that situation, we need to be careful to judge that situation, because that can look vastly different when you're on the inside. But just to say that there's no, when it comes to this role, there's no cookie cutter scenarios or schemes or anything like that, because it's going to look different depending on your situation. And so, as we're talking about this and looking at this, and I was reading another author, his comments on these things, and he made a point to kind of reiterate the fact as far as our responsibility to our in-laws as well. And so I know a lot of times these sort of things can develop problems within a marriage and things like that. But when we back up and we look at Ephesians chapter 5 and how that the husband and wife, how they become one, they're now a complete unit. And so basically what's hers is mine and what's mine is hers. And so when it comes to her parents, then my responsibility extends to them too as well, because we've taken on this role together as husband and wife. We have become one, and so therefore her parents become my responsibility as well. And so we should never be selfish with our time, with our money, things like that when it comes to our in-laws. We should be willing to step up and take care of our in-laws just like we would our own parents in those situations. And so we've got a lot of good examples here in this congregation of people who have done that. And so we need to be willing to do that when that time comes. I want to talk a little bit more about other ways we can honor our parents, but as far as this particular topic, what we've talked about here, any comments, any questions, or anything like that anybody has? Yeah, Dylan.
Shane, this honor that you're talking about, it not only extends to the in-laws, as you just pointed out, but it's also grandparents. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 3 says, honor widows who are really widows. Verse 4, but if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home and to repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before God. And the context of 1 Timothy 5 is talking about that financial honor, that helping the widow, and that responsibility extends not only to the children that Ephesians 6 verses 1 and 2 is talking about, but also the grandchildren.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was reading some things and I saw that point. I meant it never made it to my notes. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a very good point. There are a lot of situations where we need to step in and help with our grandparents. And there may have been a situation where our parents may be deceased, but yet we still have grandparents. Then, our role is to kind of step in to that role of our parents. Yeah, Tim.
And I think most people here would do this naturally. But Proverbs 27:10, do not forsake your own friend, nor your father's friend.
Yeah.
I think that some versions might render this as honor.
Yeah.
But our father's friends, our mother's friends, maybe not acquaintances, but friends, we have an obligation there. And as opportunity might present itself, we need to realize our obligation.
And I think that's correct. And I've seen that borne out, in my parents, and, Dad, these friends that my grandfather had, he would say, we need to do this because he was your papa's friend. And so that's a good point as well. So we're honoring. There's a lot to honor. It permeates and branches out in a lot of different areas. And so that's a good point as well.
Shane?
Yeah.
You mentioned over in Matthew 15 a while ago, a couple verses beyond what you were talking about. The Lord said, talking about these people, said that draw near to me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. You pointed out, and I believe Brother Mark brought also, the aspect of awe, the mental part of honor.
Yeah.
Here is addressing, the speech part of honor. Of course, this particular thing here, central hollow on it, that we understand that you can honor people with your will, and then also venerate. You talked about actions. We're discussing actions here. So just the three aspects of honor. How we hold them in awe, how we talk about them, how we talk to them, and how we act towards them and for them.
Okay. Very, very good point. Thank you, Sid. Thank you. Anything else? So I thought what we would do is just kind of give some practical ways that we can honor our parents, and some have already been stated in our study and comments so far, and you may think of more as we go through these, but just respecting their authority. And so while there may be a point where we're not under their immediate authority, as long as our parents live, they have a type of authority over us. And so we understand. We talked a little bit last week about how as when we're living under their roof, we're obeying in all things, as we're taught there in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 20. Those type things. But yet, this is an authority that's going to extend beyond that home. As we leave and cleave, as so to speak, we're leaving father and mother, we're cleaving to our wife, we're creating this other household. They still have this type of authority over us, and we need to respect that. And so when our parents speak, we have the obligation to listen no matter what age we are. That's an obligation we have. And they have that authority over us. And so that honor prompts us to listen and to pay special heed to what they are saying. This is a special relationship that we have with our parents. And one thing I would like to point out, and a lot of you young people, I'm not sure why we have some of these young people in here this morning, but I'm glad they're here. Nobody wants you to succeed more than your parents. If you want to know your number one fan, most of the time it's your parents. They want you to succeed. They want you to be successful in family, in your business, in all sorts of things, but especially if they're godly parents, they want you to be successful spiritually, and they want you to make it to heaven. And so, these things they are telling you, while it may seem like they're just trying to hold you back and keep you down and not allow you to spread your wings and fly, it comes a lot of times from experience. But in the vast majority of cases, nobody wants to see you succeed any more than your parents do. And so we need to be listening to that. And so, as our parents grow older and their mind and body become weaker, this part of this relationship is going to evolve, and it's going to change. And it's something that we have to evolve with. And so, but that honor for their authority there, as we said, as we look back, maybe the mental capacity is not there now, but, they've told us a lot of stuff through the years. And as we look back on all those instructions, we need to be honoring that authority there. And so any comments on that particular point there? Another point I had was showing gratitude. We should honor their authority, but we should show gratitude. Honoring parents, would also involve showing thankfulness for all that they have done for us throughout our life. And so we should be very thankful and gracious toward our parents for the things that they do for us. Those of us who are lucky enough to have our parents still in our life and they continue to do stuff for us, even into our adulthood. And so we need to be thankful for that. And, this would include showing appreciation for the sacrifices that they made throughout our childhood, because more than likely, parents make sacrifices. If they're the proper type of parent, then they've made some sacrifices. And it could be time, it could be monetarily, it could be a lot of different things. But if someone's not making a sacrifice as a parent, they're not doing it right. And so we need to be thankful for those things. Proverbs 23, verse 22 says, "Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old." And so this is that attitude of graciousness, thankfulness that proceeds into their old age. And so that is a way that we honor our parents. And I've got a few more, and as we go throughout the week, if there's some things that you can think of, something that you might want to bring up in class next week as a practical way that we can honor our fathers and mothers, we will, Lord willing, spend a little bit more time looking at this next week. And as we get into the next passage there, and Lord willing, we'll get into bring them up in the nurture and admonition, and then, this provoking our children to wrath. And the thing I'd like to do there as well is look at some practical ways, or impractical, I don't know exactly how we can provoke our children to wrath. What are some ways that we can do that? Tell me how this is done so that I can be sure not to do that. And again, I believe this idea of provoking our children to wrath can extend into adulthood as well, and maybe a lot of times even more so, as we deal with these children that now are out on their own and providing for themselves and things like that. A lot of times it's easy for us to start provoking them when we feel like we're losing control over their life. And so if you can kind of be thinking about that, and Lord willing, we'll look at some ways that we can provoke our children to wrath. So I really appreciate everyone's attention and those who participated.